Dubois Akeen advises our last group of session 1. This team has been working on eliminating e-waste in Chicago.
Am I good to go? All right, hi everybody, and welcome. My name is Eli, and I'm excited to present our project, a fresh game plan for eliminating e-waste in Chicago, which is actually my hometown. And as I worked through this project, I reflected on the differences between my community and other communities in Chicago, and it really changed a lot of my perspectives. And so as we go through this project, I invite you to reflect on your own experiences as well. All right, so our client was Fresh Supply. Their vision was to foster intergenerational change through justice-centered projects, equitable technologies, and creative placemaking. They also provide employment to the youth of West Chicago who work to make information more accessible. And now they want to work on bridging something called the digital divide through circularity. So what does that mean? Well, the digital divide is the divide between those who have access to modern information, such as the internet, and those who do not. A community facing an example of the digital divide is the west side of Chicago, where 40% of residents earn less than $25,000 per year. So therefore, you think about the high cost of technology, that's a major barrier for them. The second part is circularity. Circularity is the process of repurposing, reusing, or recycling materials. And so the black box to your right represents the area of the tech value chain in which our group worked to implement circular practices. So let's take a step back and let's talk about e-waste or electronic waste. When it is improperly disposed of, it ends up in landfills. And in landfills, it can leach harmful heavy metals such as lead or mercury or cadmium, which gets into the water, into the air, into the soil. And when you're exposed to these pollutants, it can cause a lot of health impacts aside from environmental impacts as well, such as organ damage or increasing your rate of developing cancer. And unfortunately, marginalized communities like the west side of Chicago are disproportionately impacted by this. So for example, 80% of all incinerators in the United States are located in a marginalized community. Furthermore, e-waste as a global issue is getting worse. By 2030, it's predicted that 82 million tons of e-waste will be produced. However, this represents a $62 billion opportunity in recoverable materials. So what do? We take circularity practices, we divert e-waste away from landfills, we repurpose them, reuse them, recycle them, redistribute them to communities like those on the west side of Chicago, helping them bridge the digital divide. That is the goal of the End E-Waste campaign, which was developed by our client, Fresh Supply. So in order to help us develop this campaign, we used Fresh Supply's innovative technology called FlowAmigo. FlowAmigo is an automated text-based platform, and it shares information with community members on the west side in a way that does not require internet access or a smartphone. So here's how it works. A user will message SMS back and forth with a human automated system. This human automated system will ask for an overview or info of who they're messaging, and then it'll give them a menu of options which they can select from. Furthermore, Fresh Supply employs the youth of West Chicago to develop these human automated systems. So we are using this because it's accessible, it bridges the digital divide, and it employs youth on the west side of Chicago. Right? So in order to develop a campaign, we utilized various primary research methodologies. First, we interviewed our client. Then we hosted a game night. And during this game night, we identified gaming dynamics, which served to increase participation. And then we created 3 community surveys, which were issued through Google Forms, FlowAmigo, and we utilized Fresh Supply's professional network. So the first survey was sent out to understand the needs of the West Side community. The second survey was sent out to understand who can serve as a collection hub for used electronics and their operational capacity. And then the third survey was sent out to Chicago at large, and this was to determine electronic waste trends. We don't have the results just yet. So using all of this knowledge, we developed the Fresh framework. The FRESH framework can be used to implement an end e-waste campaign in any city across the world. FRESH stands for focus, relationships, engagement, strategy, and highlights. So focus is about focusing on the core issue, like who is the neighborhood experiencing the digital divide? Relationships is about developing relationships between stakeholders and partners, and these partnerships should fill operational gaps. Engagement is about engaging these stakeholders and partners actively in the campaign. Strategy is about creating a marketing plan with outreach and events to keep people engaged. And then highlights is about highlighting the impacts and the progress. So let's now look at how this FRESH framework can be used to implement an e-waste campaign on the west side of Chicago. So first, focus on the issue. On the west side, 40% of community members do not have internet access. And though we don't have data about specific e-waste trends on the west side, we do know that globally, only 1/5 of electronic waste is recycled. So we can take the other 4/5, repurpose it, remanufacture it, redistribute it out to the members on the west side community, thus helping them bridge the digital divide. Next is relationships, and we have two strategies for this. First, we want to leverage existing relationships. So, for example, schools and youth organizations can implement e-waste into their curriculum. The next is expanding further relationships. So, for example, different corporations can help provide with funding or plannings and logistics. Next is engagement, and we've developed two engagement strategies, one for non-digital participants and one for digital participants. And this is to increase accessibility based on the digital divide. So, for example, non-digital participants, when they go to an event or when they participate, they will receive a printout that shows, say, the rewards that they've gotten. Digital participants will get this through Flow Amigo. We will also offer a range of gamified rewards. For example, when you participate, you get a voucher to a local restaurant. Ultimately, the goal is to shift the motivation for engagement from extrinsic to intrinsic, meaning we bring people in with these rewards like vouchers, and then they keep coming back because they get satisfaction or pride from participating. And we do this because intrinsic is more impactful and effective in the long term. Next is strategy. We have a couple different approaches. The first is we have a game plan for implementing a flagship event. Now there's 3 types of flagship events: high, medium, and low capacity. Capacity refers to the amount of funding that the event has. So for example, renting out an entire park for the day versus renting out a booth at an existing event. We also have a content calendar, which walks you through how to market the flagship event and how to keep people engaged in between events. So for example, Tech Tip Tuesdays. Lastly is highlights. We want to highlight impacts and progress to those developing the campaign and those involved in the campaign. We do this through a couple different ways. The first is feedback channels. Now, these serve to provide necessary information to those who are developing the campaign so they know how to increase participation. So, for example, a post-event survey. We also have live impact tracking, and this is to show live updates of participant progress. So, for example, a live dashboard with how much e-waste has been donated. Lastly, we have metrics of success, and there's 3 types. Quantitative would be like how many people attended an event. Qualitative, like success stories. And then impact, so how many devices have actually been redistributed. So in conclusion, the End E-Waste campaign wants to tap into the growing e-waste issue by leveraging circular initiatives to divert e-waste away from landfills, refurbish them, repair them, and redistribute them to community members like those on the west side in order to bridge the digital divide. And for our clients, we will provide them with the FRESH framework, which again you can use to implement an e-waste campaign in any city across the world. We're going to give specific recommendations on how to launch the first End E-Waste campaign on the west side of Chicago. We'll also give them a marketing toolkit and feedback and key performance indicators. Lastly, I want to thank our team, our clients, and all of you for coming out today. Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation. I guess what I would love to hear from you is where did you base these recommendations off of? Because I know you did a survey, right, but you didn't have the results. So if you could just talk us through kind of what was your methodology in order to come up with the recommendations? And then did you think at all about how these recommendations would be implemented? It felt like a lot of really great ideas, but having built dashboards and like some of this is really complicated. So did you think through how they might be implemented?
Yeah, so the first part, in the interest of time, we didn't include the secondary methodologies for research, but that research was about various parts of implementing a campaign that we felt were important. So like, what makes a good collection hub, or what can incentivize people? And then all of that research, and also in talking with our clients, all of that research was used to develop this framework, right? And so it was the secondary research that you didn't quite see here, but is in the paper. Could you repeat the second part of the question?
Yes. So did you think about like how these recommendations might be implemented?
Yeah.
Is it a phased approach? Or
Yes.
like, is there a funding need?
Yeah, so the first and foremost, you want to think about funding. So that's why we have the different tiers. And then what you didn't see, again, in the interest of time and because it's so wordy, let's say you have a high capacity event. We have an entire table that talks about like funding and events and partners and everything that you can think of that goes into campaign. And then under each one, it tells you, here are the people you can reach out to, here are the events that you can do. And again, that's all in the research paper, but it's a little too wordy and lengthy to put in the presentation, but it's there. Yeah.
Globally, the recycling rate for e-waste is very low. Even in EU, I think there's about 35% that gets collected. How do you tackle that? How do you get the e-waste tracking?
Great question. Yeah. So one of the issues with e-waste is once it leaves the store, the company doesn't really have a way to track it. And so part of the purpose of the community collection hubs and the Flow Migo in this campaign is to make people aware about e-waste, to engage them in this campaign, and then offer them an outlet for dropping off their electronic devices. And that's trying to get those devices back, right?
Hi, thank you for your presentation. That was great. I just wanted to check if you thought about advocating for extended producer responsibility as a solution to help the collection methodologies for e-waste, since that is one of the greatest challenges, but the companies that produce the electronics that eventually become waste can happily fund some of that.
Yeah, so part of the corporate partnerships extending to people that we haven't worked with yet. One example that comes to mind is Dell's partnership with Goodwill, which has been in place for 20-some years, right? Where if any tech product is dropped off at Goodwill, Dell will take it, repurpose it, or get what they need out of it. And so that's one of the partnerships that we are looking into. In terms of leveraging policy, we didn't look specifically at that because it's a little bit beyond the scope. But if the project gets large enough or they have the right connections, then that's definitely something I would say that they should leverage.